Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Creepy and Geeky. This week, the kids are back with me.
I know. I realized that it sounded like a howl in the moment.
Well, obviously, you can hear that the kids are back with me. So, and this week we're going to be talking about the Scream franchise. So that should be a lot of fun. But to begin with, it's been literally about a month since we last all got together for an episode. So we want to talk about some of the things that we've been into that's been creepy or geeky. Harrison, why don't you start us off? What have you been up to?
I've lately been very interested in Magic the Gathering Arena. I used to dabble in Magic the Gathering when I was in college. It was something that my wife and I got into, but it kind of fell to the wayside because bills come first. But Magic the Gathering Arena has been pretty fun. Kind of lets me scratch that itch without having to spend too much money, so that's really nice. Otherwise, I've been playing the game The Outer Worlds by Obsidian Entertainment, and that's been a lot of fun. Very kind of 1920s aesthetic, sci-fi corporate hell place where everything's run by the corporations, and you're looking to try and give a little bit of freedom back to this backwater colony in the middle of space.
All right. That sounds cool. Yeah, I've heard of Outer Worlds before. I've seen people talking about it, but as you know, I'm not much of a gamer, so I don't partake as much in those.
It's got the vibes that I like about a lot of genre fiction. It's very kind of Western aesthetic, but with a twist.
That's cool. Okay, Katrina, make a noise over there with your water bottle.
I'm sorry.
What have you been up to?
I have been recently playing the latest installment of the Life is Strange franchise, Life is Strange True Colors.
Okay.
I just finished the second Life is Strange game. I had left it off apparently back in November of 2020, so I finished the last chapter and a half that was left. So
I do that with incredible frequency as well, where I just leave the last like main quest not finished. I'm like,
oh man,
I'm sure this game has like 3 hours left in it, and it's actually
this game actually did have 3 hours because each chapter was about 2 hours.
Well.
So yeah, but
Point taken.
The end of Life is Strange 2 is good. I'm playing the new one now, and I'm having to restart a chapter, like a portion of a chapter, so that I can make the correct choice, because it's a choice-based game, and I found out that I had chosen the wrong choice. So I'm restarting it.
Oh, if only we could re-choose our choices in life as easy it is in a video game.
To be fair, the person that's the main character has superpowers, so...
Well, also, wasn't the whole idea of the first game that
you
had the power to rewind time?
It's not that anymore. It was only the first game, but
okay.
I've been doing that game-wise, and entertainment, like books, other media. I've been listening to the audiobook of Catching Fire from the Hunger Games trilogy.
Okay.
And I have realized that I definitely did not watch that movie as much as I did the first one, because the stuff they're talking about, I don't remember if it's in the movie or not. But in the first one, I was like, oh yeah, that was in the movie. That wasn't in the movie. But for now, I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah, but you were also really a lot younger when those books came out. You loved the whole Hunger Games like world and everything. You read all 3 books.
I read all 3 books after the first movie came out in 2012. So I was like, sorry for the old people, but I was in 6th grade in 2012, or not 6th grade. I was in 5th grade in 2012. So that's when I read the books.
It's all right. She just celebrated her 20th birthday last week, so haha.
Incorrect. 19 plus 1th birthday. It's my 19 plus 1th year being alive.
It's 20.
That's
it's okay to age.
That's not a number.
All right,
anyways,
so what else?
I've also started watching the Archive 81 TV show on Netflix. It's pretty good so far. I did start watching it while I was doing laundry, so it was a time, because I would like stop folding socks to like be like, oh, that's creepy, what's going on? and then I would continue. So it was really good. It's kind of funky. It's kind of, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of Black Mirror in a way. I don't know, it's weird.
Okay.
I'm totally going to be wrong. People are going to be yelling at me about this because I didn't pay attention.
They're currently
but
yelling at their phones.
I know,
It's
they're
not like that.
Yeah, so it's just, it has vibes of like Black Mirror and sort of like the newest Candyman. It's weird.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
I don't know. The vibes are weird, but they're really fucking creepy, and it's like one of the like most recent things in media that I'm actually like freaked out by when I'm watching it. So
Cool.
Good job,
That's good.
right.
producers, directors,
Yeah.
whatever.
Writers.
Yeah, actors.
Yeah. All right. For me, I finally got to watch Yellow Jackets after I'd seen literally everybody on Twitter talking about it. I finally got that free trial of Showtime so I could just binge watch it, and I actually watched it over the course of 2 days, like 5 episodes each day, just getting through it. And it's a great show. Everybody was not lying about that. There's so many times where people hype up something and I'm just like, I finally get to watch it and it's just but this was definitely worth watching. I tried to get you guys both to watch it before the trial ended, but you guys didn't have time, due to work and school and the baby and everything. So it's but definitely later on, if you guys get a chance, get a free trial of Showtime or something and give it a watch, because it's a great show, great performances by all the actresses, and it's insane. So
I mean, when you showed me the trailer, it looked interesting.
oh yeah, it's the trailer shows you just
being a dad comes first.
yeah. So one thing that we have made time for, you and I, Harrison, has been the Book of Boba Fett.
Yep.
Harrison and I are big Star Wars fans. I raised him to appreciate the Star Wars. He's
The stars and the war.
yeah. He's
Wars in the stars.
he's a little bit more of a geek about it than I am. I would say a little bit more. He plays the RPG. He knows like ship names and weapon names.
About it,
He just
Dad
gets
is a nerd.
Yeah. No, I'm a geek. He's the nerd. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
So
with you.
anyway, so we're both enjoying Book of Boba Fett. I've really enjoyed the new, despite everybody online, like not everybody, but there's a good portion of people I follow on Twitter and elsewhere, just like people are not enjoying Boba Fett for differing reasons. Some people don't care about his, progression as a character, but they just feel like the show is too slow or meandering or whatever. And I can understand those criticisms. Don't get me wrong. There are times where it's just kind of like, okay, let's get to some other plot here. But I think overall, whatever deficiencies it has are made up for by the fact that, to me, it's compelling. I'm enjoying seeing Boba Fett grow as a character. We're finally getting some actual depth to him. I mean, we literally had no, like, for the original trilogy, we had no amount of time with him, yet he became one of the coolest characters.
I mean, he was, to be frank and honest, he was essentially a cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
Like villain who just had a cool costume.
Yeah.
And he was just there to be the foil for our heroes, and
Well, he just seemed
and
like
so
the
he was
cool
just kind of-
cowboy.
exactly. He had the black hat.
He had the swagger, and he was quiet. He didn't talk much.
Exactly.
Yeah, he just looked cool. And now we're actually getting to see that underneath it all. We've gotten little bits here and there. Django, his past being
We've had a little bit in
non-black-
Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And I don't think he popped up in Rebels at all, but he did pop up in Clone Wars a couple times. But it is, for what it's worth, this show is doing the best character work done for what otherwise would have just been a guy in a green suit of armor.
Yeah.
And so that's, for what it's worth, not that bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's a good show, and that I'm excited to see where it goes. Looks like we're gonna get a little Mandalorian action next week. We got a little tease in the musical cues in that one, so we'll see what happens. Besides that, I've been reading some Ed Brubaker comic books. He had a recent Humble Bundle. There was a Humble Bundle that had a bunch of his comic books, mostly with his collaborator Sean Phillips. And I've always loved their comics. And so I snapped that up. It was $25 for like almost everything they've done together. And it's great. Criminal, Fatale, Kill or Be Killed, The Fade Out. So many good stories. So much like good gritty crime stuff, which I love. And there's a couple of other projects that he did with another artist, like there's Velvet in there and Scene of the Crime. So it was a good bundle. I tried to hype it up on Twitter a couple of times. Nobody seemed to care, but yeah, it's a good bundle of comic books. I told Harrison about it. I'm gonna share them with him so that he can check them out too. It's a good batch of comic books, and can't wait to keep reading more of those. So, All right. Well, let's get into the main topic of discussion today. We are going to be talking about the Scream franchise. The latest movie just came out about, a week and a half ago? Almost 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
and
just about.
it'll be over 2 weeks by the time this episode comes out. And it's doing gangbusters at the box office. And it kicked Spider-Man out of #1 for a week, and now Spider-Man inched its way back in.
For the first time in a month.
But it came back. Spider-Man came back this last weekend. It's back at #1. But Scream, the new Scream is great. We're not going to spoil it on here during this first part of the discussion. We're actually going to talk about the first 4 movies. Then we're going to end the episode for everybody, and then we're going to continue it and have a little spoilery discussion of the 5th movie afterward. That way you guys can listen for most of the episode, cut right there at the end, and come back when you've seen it. So for me, I've been a fan of Scream from the beginning. I actually was working at a theater. My kids currently work at a theater, but I was actually working at a theater in 1996 when it came out. And that was, nobody expected it. Nobody really thought, because at that point slashers had died and nobody was making any really good ones. They were all going direct to video, if they were even making any. They were all crappy. And even the history of slashers in general, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, those were so up and down in quality and stories and stuff like that. There was no consistency, or there was rarely any consistency. They tried here and there, but for the most part, nobody really took the time to, keep an ongoing narrative that made sense. I mean, and we didn't know that with, the first Scream, that they were going to try and do a series, but when the first Scream came out, that was it was nuts. It hit big, and it didn't hit big at first, but it, a lot of people went to go see it at first, and then word of mouth over a couple of weeks, then it generated a bunch of heat. And by the time, because it premiered in December of 1996, so around the holidays, and I think by the end of the month, or sometime in January, it was rocking.
Well,
it was doing really well.
Back then, there wasn't social media, so
Yeah.
the amount of the global communication, the diffusion of information,
Right.
was much less at that point, because it was either word of mouth or people. I honestly don't know how else. Maybe critics, I guess.
Yeah, magazines and critics
Yeah.
and stuff like that. That's how
so.
most people would have gotten it at
Yeah.
that point. There was a little bit of internet at that point, but
Yeah.
not the way it is now.
Yeah.
So for sure that it
was harder for it to get that. It was slow going, but for now,
Right.
if a movie's good, everyone hears about it right away.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you sometimes hear about it before it even comes out,
Yeah.
because you get so many critics, or you get, the advanced screening people who talk about stuff. That's kind of something you kind of miss before the internet age, is that back then you could get surprised by a movie. You could, no matter how good a movie looked.
person who saw it early.
Yeah. And so no matter how good a movie looked, you weren't sure if it was going to be that great or not until you actually went and saw it or read a review in a magazine about it or the newspaper or whatever. And so it's for those boys and girls in the audience who don't know what a magazine or newspaper is, it's a periodical made with paper that people read before the internet.
I'm going to say I'm probably among the age of the youngest demographic, and I'm probably younger than that age. So you're talking to literally no one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure our audience probably skews older.
Yeah. I was going to say, I don't think anyone who's like
Thanks for
14.
undercutting my joke, Katrina.
It's my job. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
I got to keep you humble.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. But yeah, so the first Scream came out and I fucking loved it. Like, that hit me. Like, so for me, and I've talked about this a little bit, that I've always loved movies in general, but I really didn't become a movie fan, like, hardcore until I was in I'd say probably my 20s. So I wasn't as big into horror. I liked horror movies. I watched them as a kid and I enjoyed them. But Scream was one of those ones that really kind of broke it for me for a while. That was just like, I love horror movies. This is so cool. This is so fun. It like riffs on the older horror movies. It's funny. Which, you know, as I've mentioned before, I love horror comedies. And I think that Scream fits firmly in that in a way. Yes, it's a horror, but it's got enough comedy in it to, you know, keep you going, to give you that little comedy jolt. It's not as, you know, splat stick as like a Evil Dead or Shaun of the Dead or whatever that was meant to be funny. This is meant to be a horror movie, a slasher film with comedic elements. And I think that's what, regardless, it still worked for me on both of those levels. And I was such a huge fan that thankfully VHS tapes were available to finally buy around that time period. They hadn't been during the 80s, unless you paid like $100 or more for them, because VHS movies were made for rental. So the only people who could afford were rich people or people who video rental stores who could afford to buy the $100 tape and then rent it out and get that money back for it. In the 90s, tapes became cheaper. And so I would go to Suncoast and I would go to other places. Suncoast was my main thing. I love Suncoast. And because you could find good box sets and stuff there, VHS stuff. And that's actually what I was going to say, was that I got a 2-tape set of the first Scream movie. That the first one was just the movie, and then the second one was the movie with audio commentary, which was crazy because, you know, that up until that point you only really got audio commentary or special features on laser discs, and I couldn't afford laser disc or anything. And this was 96 was like the year 96, 97 was right around when DVD was just about to hit. So tapes were still a thing for a good long while. Tapes are now making a resurgence with collectors and
hipsters.
And well, yeah, but I mean, the Venn diagram of that is pretty much a circle. No, I'm just messing with all the collectors. But yeah, that was I loved that, and I had gotten other tape sets like that too. I had gotten a Fargo one and I don't know, a couple other ones, and then there were some other ones that were putting out director's cut stuff. So it was a great time. But that was a great set. I loved that, and I would listen to the commentary, and I watched the hell out of that movie, as you guys well know, because you guys grew up with me watching it and watching the first 3 movies a lot. You guys really grew up with those movies, and you know, they were part of me. And over time, I kind of lost. And I think it's just because over time, new things came in, and the Scream had kind of, like, I'd watched those first 3 movies so much that I kind of burned out on them. But having watched the 25th anniversary at the theaters of the first Scream, rekindled that for me, and especially with the new one that had just come out. And so all of that is just like, I'm excited for Scream again. But yeah, for me, that first movie was like crazy awesome, and it ignited for a little while. It ignited a little bit of horror fandom with me, but because you guys were kids, and you guys didn't really like horror too much. You guys liked it somewhat, but it was weird. You guys kind of got a little bit older and got scared and didn't want to watch it, and your mom wasn't into it, so I just kind of put a lot of the horror stuff on the background. We would have watched some things like the Final Destination movies and some of those other things, but like a lot of the stuff got put on the back burner until 2018, when I just went, hey, horror, this is awesome. So, and then now looks like my room threw up a horror in it. So, so
you just need to paint the walls red and black, and then
there you go, black with some blood drips.
Yeah.
That would
Paint
be awesome.
splatter like blood splatter.
So, yeah. What do you guys? You guys have some thoughts on the first one?
I think that the first one is a very smart thriller. I think that it does a lot of work to kind of deconstruct the genre that it is a part of.
Yeah.
And also to keep the audience guessing and make sure that it's not an easy answer on who Ghostface is, and actually make that a part of the viewing experience on intentionally putting in red herrings, intentionally involving the audience in the experience of trying to identify the killer and pulling the ultimate switcheroo on them at the end, and having everyone kind of look like just everyone like Pikachu.
Pikachu meme. Yeah.
But no, it's very good. Created a lot of really standout characters. Ironically, created the tropes that would follow it in every other
there were a lot
movie.
of imitators after Scream came out. There was a lot of
Scary
writing.
movie for one.
Well, I mean, the Scary movie things were spoofs, but I Know What You Did Last Summer, Valentine, Urban Legend. We had a whole slew of teen-based. I mean, slashers have always been teen-based anyway, but this whole late 90s, early 2000s boom in the teen slasher, aesthetic, and that Scream kind of created, that everybody tried to glom onto to varying effects. Some were good, most were eh.
Well, and so compounding on that, I've got two things for that. Where Scream, to its credit, is also a film that doesn't rely on a lot of the tropes that came before it in terms of even the 80s slashers. It is its own genre of slasher that it creates, because it doesn't have the same like women in like bad situations. Like there isn't the girl who's killed in the sex scene. There isn't there aren't that doesn't happen.
No, there's for an R-rated series as this is, there's no nudity. There's no real sex in this.
The only real moment where things heat up happens completely off screen.
Right.
And then by the time we're back to it, it's done.
Right.
And we move on to the story because and I think that's intentional. I think it's intentional that we ramp up to it and you're like, oh, and then it cuts down and then it's like, oh, okay, this isn't that kind of movie. And that's kind of could be the catchphrase of the whole movie is, this isn't that kind of movie.
Right. Well, and that's what the Scream movies do, is subvert those tropes, turn them on their head. We in the first one, you get most of these slashers have final girls, but this wasn't just a final girl. This was a trio of people who survived and then continued on into each successive movie after that.
Yeah.
And so you had this group of people who continued to show up every time, continued to battle this. And like you said, the mystery of who Ghostface was, that's an essential part of each movie, is figuring out who they are. Each one, you think it's going to be, it's going to be the boyfriend. No, it's not the boyfriend this time. It's every time it's something different, but they do such a good job at the red herring, like you said, that it's
it's
awesome.
To that point, it's not a mystery that feels undeserved. It if you are actually following along,
Right.
there you can
The
actually
clues are all there.
guess the killer.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, it's even more engaging, because if you do guess the killer, then it's that I gotcha moment. It's the
Right.
it's like I knew it was you, and you could have like if you were in that situation and you could have called it out. But what I was saying earlier about how it kind of created the tropes, I was also even including the later Scream movies in it, where where basically the mystery killer, the guy or person setting up the rules of whatever movie that this is going to be. It creates tropes, which is something that and no spoilers for the new movie, but the new movie plays a lot with how those tropes have affected even the Scream films, and it calls that back into that one.
Well, and that's what's great about this series too is, one, it's got great consistency. We have the same characters going through the same problems. They're different killers each time, but they're the same problems. They're still dealing with somebody pretending to be Ghostface or being Ghostface, killing everybody, and they have to figure out who it is and stop them before.
And it's usually in the same place, so then that
Yeah.
I feel like I know Woodsboro now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's,
That's the thing, is that with the continuation of the movies, because the first movie was a meta-narrative on horror films in general, that the next one, Scream 2, had to be a meta-narrative about sequels. But also, on top of that, it wasn't just a narrative about sequels in general, but it was also a meta-narrative about itself, and about, because of the Stab movies, the Stab franchise that's established in these movies, which is great because you get to be able to talk about the silliness sometimes of horror movies, but at the same time having this very, in a way, deep discussion about what horror movies are and what they mean to people and so much more. It's I'm like having a hard time with my thoughts, but it's just a great, to me, it's just so great of a series because it's so good at doing, not only speaking about itself, but about horror movies in general, and also about speaking about the times that those that each movie came out. And that's what's made the Scream franchise so good, and that's what makes each installment, most of the installments, very good about not only talking about themselves or sequels or a trilogy or whatever, that they also speak about the, like I said, the horror at the time, horror movies at the time, because things change over time. Horror movies affect us differently. We go through cycles. Like we said, the slashers come and go. Other stuff goes on. And so it's great. So
I think at the moment we're in like a thriller, like a psychological
we're in
thriller.
we're in the elevated horror period where, like we said, and we'll get to this when we talk about Scream 5 after the end here, but that definitely plays into that later. But with the first movie, it was just about talking about deconstructing horror movies. These people have grown up with horror movies. They know the tropes. They know the things. Not only is the killer using that against them, but also the survivors, Sydney, Dewey, Gale, all of them, Randy, they all have to use that knowledge themselves to fight back and use that against the killers. And so, but that's what's great too, is that the killers used horror movies to do their kills, to create this narrative for themselves, and to do all this stuff that was interesting. You didn't get that too much before this. Like, there wasn't much, if anything, that really spoke to horror movies and using those as things to kill. There's an 80s movie called Fade to Black, where this guy was obsessed with horror movies, and he would dress up in makeup and costumes and kill people. Okay. But beyond that, I can't think of anything else that was really like this. And that's, I think, what made it fresh and interesting, and what made it such a big hit.
Well, and I think there's a couple other things that stood out to me in the first Scream, where it's not just playing with the tropes of horror movies within the writing. It's playing with the tropes of horror movies across the entire production. The soundtrack, the stings it uses, it like builds up the tension and then it falls away because it doesn't actually build up to anything.
Right.
And so it really kind of plays with you as the audience because you're used to these things, and it kind of is ingrained in you. As I can't imagine watching it actually when it came out, because that has to have been a completely different experience to have grown up with all of these tropes and then having them undercut in the theater.
Well, it's like when Henry Winkler, as the principal, goes out to he hears the noise and he goes out and he opens the door and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And then he turns around and he scares himself. So there's all these moments where you're just like, oh my god, this like tension is ramped up, and then you get like this, oh okay. Then he goes out and he goes out a second time because he hears a noise and he opens the door and there's the janitor. Wes Craven dressed as Freddy Krueger, by the way. Obviously you guys know that. Everybody in the audience knows that, but that's hilarious to me. But, so then that also is a joke. Everybody's supposed to laugh at that. Oh my God, that's hilarious, Freddy Krueger. And then he comes back in, closes the door, boom, killed. And so it's like, you're like you're supposed to be getting, by that point where he gets killed, you've been like up and down, up and down, up and down, that you're just like, okay, nothing's gonna happen. They're obviously not. Yeah. Oh my god, So,
and then the other thing I was gonna say was that with Scream, and especially with the first one, they make the killers very human, which is also very atypical for slasher films that came before that, especially with Freddy versus Jason, or not Freddy versus Jason, but Freddy and Jason.
Michael Myers.
These
unstoppable killers.
Like, these unstoppable killers who resurrect from the dead and like have all these tropes, which also comes up inside of Scream, is the killer resurrecting from the dead.
Yeah.
With the killer being a real person, you get really fun things like how the Ghostface costume is just a Halloween costume. Yep. It's a dime store costume that you can pick up anywhere. Anybody can get it.
And that plays into the movie too, because then everybody starts buying it and starts terrorizing the halls of the school.
Exactly. And then the other aspect of that is that oftentimes you'll see Ghostface trip or fall or get hit in the face and actually like get hurt, whiplash, get knocked out, and like actually like they're a real person inside that mask, and it adds a certain level of hilarity at the fact that like this is just a normal guy, and then at the other side of the coin, actually somewhat, at least for me, like kind of some genuine terror at the fact that like this person is a real person. Like this is not a supernatural killer. This isn't someone I in my brain can disassociate with the fact that someone like this wouldn't really exist. This is just the fantasy of a movie. It's like, no, this is actually kind of spooky because this is kind of somewhat real.
Yeah.
It makes me like kind of think of Scooby-Doo. Because those people in the costumes in Scooby-Doo weren't unstoppable usually.
Yeah, right.
So and then they get knocked out or they get like somehow entrapped and then they get unmasked.
Scooby-Doo always had those awesome Rube Goldberg-esque,
so
traps that they would do. So.
And a large part of the Scream franchise is that you get to the end of the movie and the killers are at the top of their game. They've gotten everyone like lined up for the slaughter, and they're like, "All right, and wait, where's this person?" Or and you realize that like they're fallible. Like they miss things and they can get tricked, and that's
making mistakes is human.
Yep.
And so
exactly.
That is
well, and this was also another thing that I thought is cool about it too, is that there's not just one killer. Other than one movie, Scream 3, every movie has two killers. It's cool because you think through the whole movie it's just one person. In the first one, anyway. Yeah. By the second one, you're expecting two killers. Yeah, you're like, okay, there's got to be another one. But in that first movie, you're like, this guy is everywhere. How is he doing this? Like, he's really quick, he's really fast, and it's because there's two of them.
And that's the one supernatural aspect of Ghostface.
Well, and it sets it up to seem supernatural.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my god! And then also because of the two killers, it also throws the suspicion. It makes it hard for the audience and even the people in the movie itself to figure out who the actual killers are, because, well, wait, Billy was actually in jail when another phone call was made. How does that work? And so that is very cool for me that one, they're human, they're not unstoppable, they get hurt, but also that there's two of them. It's just that's what Scream changed the game for a lot of stuff, and nobody's been able to, and thankfully nobody's been able to really recreate it. Nobody's really stolen that formula, thankfully, and just Scream is Scream, and you just let that alone. So that's what I love about it.
Like that's why Scream is so unique in terms of the horror landscape, is that it is this wonderful deconstruction of the genre while also
paving its own path,
and generating its own tropes and kind of making itself its own genre of horror.
And it's directed by a director of one of the most well-known franchises in horror who uses those iconic tropes. So to subvert his own tropes that he used in his own movies
and sometimes created
is kind of iconic. So
now Wes Craven was like one of the masters of horror. He was his filmography's kind of up and down. You can question some of his movies here and there, like Shocker or whatever, but he made 3 of the most iconic movies. He made Last House on the Left, which was huge in the 70s. He made Nightmare on Elm Street, which created the whole Freddy Krueger phenomenon, and then he helped co-create the Scream franchise. So, and that's what helped with the consistency of the whole franchise as well, is because you had one director and you had mostly one writer in Kevin Williamson. He wrote all of them except for the third one and the new one. But in the new one, Kevin Williamson's an executive producer. And so that was what was great, was you still had somebody there that was a part of it, that not just the actors, but also somebody who was a source to go to for advice or whatever. And so we'll get to that later. But
for what it's worth, I also feel that the thing that really benefits Scream is the writing, because I think that when it comes to the writing, there are a lot of movies that came out around the time that Scream did that just don't hold up today, because they were written in a certain decade and a certain zeitgeist, and they're either very 90s or they're very early 2000s, and they have a certain vibe to them. And Scream has a little bit of that, but for the most part, it's pretty timeless.
Yeah, there's a timeless quality to it that I think that, well, here's the thing. I don't even necessarily think that it's timeless, that it exists in that 90s aesthetic and stuff, but it's better. It's definitely going to be immortal, but it's definitely more about that it transcends that time period. Yes, it's in that time period. It's very much late 90s, mid to late 90s, but it's also, it
could easily be a period movie today. Where it's just that it's set in the 90s, and this is our snapshot of what the 90s look like. It doesn't have all of those very kind of like 90s isms that kind of were in cinema
to an extent. It's got some definite references. Stu saying as if, and so there's a few like little things here and there, but again, it's commenting about the times, which is fine. So it's good for that. It definitely, this franchise will definitely stand the test of time because of the consistency and quality throughout the entire franchise. Because no matter what there's people who will argue, like I've seen in the wake of this new movie, that people have been doing their own redos of, not redos, but they've been putting their own order of what their favorite movies are. And, number one usually gets the top spot for sure, because I mean, It really needs to. It's the most iconic. It's the one that started it all. Beyond that, some people think the second one is the next best. Some people put the new one as their next favorite. But so those other ones, no matter what, the quality and consistency, typically nobody says that any of them suck. Mm-hmm. That they're all part of the same franchise. They're all great. A lot of people don't like number 3, but they're wrong. And we'll get to that. But I think that's what makes it great as a whole, as a franchise and everything. It's just that consistency and quality. Yeah. Which, going into literally a year later, they fast-tracked a sequel to get it out there because they're like, oh my God, this made so much money. Let's do it again. And so then we pick up, 2 years later, Sydney and Randy are in college, mm-hmm. and the killings have started again.
Yep.
And this time, it's at her college or near her college. So it's obviously targeting her again, and chaos ensues. And of course, it's maybe the boyfriend, whatever. But then Dewey and Gale show up, and my favorite, look, number 2 is probably my least favorite of the movies. It's fine. It's a good movie. I enjoy it. But I think that number 2 retreads a lot of the same ground that the first one does. It does pick up a lot of the sequel, like they said, it does a lot of the sequel rules and changes a bunch of stuff, or doesn't change, but it ups the ante. Gorier kills, blah, blah, blah. But I just think that it retreads a lot of the same ground, and I think that because it came so quickly after the first movie that they didn't have time to really do what the first one and what the later ones do is make a commentary on horror or itself in ways that they get better, they get more meta, they get like they do later on. But the second one, I enjoy the second one. I don't remember where I was going with this. But Katrina, do you have any thoughts on the second one? We cut you out a lot.
No,
you've been very quiet.
It didn't cut me out. I just wanted you guys to finish what you were saying, and then you never finished what you were saying, so I've just been quiet.
Well, go ahead. Say what you want to say.
But I mean, the second one, I literally just go to Harrison. I'll chime in.
I'm assuming you were.
Okay. I was leading into my favorite Dewey.
Yes,
thank you.
I thought you were leading
I was
into.
going to talk about one of my favorite movies in the whole franchise. Is that okay? So the year before, 1996, the movie Broken Arrow came out, which is a crazy John Woo movie with John Travolta and Christian Slater. It's great. It's schlocky. To me, I love it. But in there's a musical cue whenever John Travolta shows up. But they use the same musical cue for every time Dewey walks up, and I love it. It cracks me up. It gives him this level of importance, but also undercutting it at the same time. Because yes, Dewey's a goofy dude. He can be really goofy, especially because when he gets in the movies, when he tries to act tough, he gets all weirdly oh, I'm gonna get all tough, but it definitely doesn't come across that way. And so when he's better when he's just being himself, and I
think he also throws in some voice breaks and stuff like that whenever he's trying to get all tough, and so it's he is very much the oh, I'm gonna protect everyone kind of character, and
that's usually when he gets knocked down or whatever.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, it's for me the dynamic between Dewey, Gale, and Sydney continues. Their bond grows. It's still cantankerous from the first one through all of them, but you can see them growing as a unit better. They all still have their own lives and everything else going on, but you can see that they're starting to get bonded by this. They were already bonded by the first one, but they're getting that deeper bond, which, I mean, that sucks. That should not be bonding them. Yeah. This whole ordeal should not be bonding them. But it does, and it's something that I enjoy in the franchise. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the kills get crazier. We get some good kills. We get some good Randy giving us the rules, Randy was always one of my favorite characters just because, he's the geek who knows all the nerd stuff, and that's always been me. I've always been the comic book nerd who knew a lot of Marvel comic stuff. Yeah.
No, I mean, Scream 2's got its high points. I think I agree that it's somewhat of a retread on the first one. I think that's mostly due to how rushed of a production it probably was, and they just kind of had to do what they could.
I think it's a great movie, regardless of any rush or anything else that they did. I don't have a problem with the movie at all. It's just my least favorite. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was rushed. You can't feel like it's rushed. It just, like I said, it feels like it's a retread, especially because the boyfriend was actually supposed to be one of the killers, and they had to change it because that got leaked.
Yeah.
And so,
I said, "Oh damn, I didn't know that."
Yeah, so it got leaked, and so they're like,
"I'm glad
crap.
they did."
Now we got to change it. Yeah, because it would have sucked to be the boyfriend again.
That would have been even worse of a retread.
Yeah.
But I think my criticisms of Scream 2 is that and again, there's a lot that Scream 2 does right. I really like the final scene on stage. I think that's a great metaphor and a great great kind of cinematic parallelism with all of that. What I find somewhat odd about it is that I can't remember his name, but one of the killers, he basically just disappears
Mickey.
For half the movie. And so for what it's worth, I mean, it's not necessarily too hard to guess that the guy who disappears halfway through the movie ends up being one of the killers.
Right.
Because there really is, from my memory, there really isn't any real explanation for it. No. And generally, he also seemed very hostile to Randy, or
because they were both like the movie geeks who were jockeying for position.
Yeah.
Well, and here's I think part of the issue with that movie too is that because yes, Mickey was part of their friend group, but he was kind of like a side member of the group. And then spoilers, because these movies are old, but the other killer was Billy's mom.
Yeah.
And which you had no idea that was going to happen, which is great, But for both of them, everybody suspected Mickey. I remember when people were talking about it, they're all like, "Oh yeah, we all suspected it was probably going to be Mickey." He's a crazy looking, movie fan that looks like he was going to kill people.
Well, also to that point, the hostile reporter was also generally
but she just seemed like she just seemed just like
her son's death.
But even then, she just seemed annoying and didn't seem like it would be like, oh yeah, she's the killer. And so that was a good curveball because you didn't really expect her. You kind of expected Mickey, but you really didn't expect her to be a part of it until it came out and it was like, oh okay, she's there, she's manipulating it all, blah blah blah. So
I think the stuff with Cotton Weary though was I personally liked the stuff with Cotton Weary because I feel like they barely touched on it in the first one. So having more context of everything, and then also having him being a red herring was also
No, that I will give it that the Cotton Weary stuff was really good for that part. Sorry, that
I forgot that Cotton Weary.
Yeah, it's
part of that movie.
Yeah,
I do agree. I did like the Cotton Weary stuff. I think that was a really good add to the story.
And having him basically working with Gale, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, well, Gale was there to try and get him to not confront, but to get some forgiveness from, or not forgiveness, but to get some.
He was trying
closure.
to get fame and rebuild his life after prison for being falsely accused of killing
her mom,
mom. And so that was an interesting side story to all that. Also, I mean, just in general, it's kind of hilarious that someone would even think Cotton would have killed someone, because the way that he acts in the movie, he acts more like a bumbling guy who's
at times he's kind of sinister at times.
He's a little bit sinister.
But I think when he's talking to Sydney,
but definitely
at the
at the
police
end.
station. When he's talking to Sydney, I'm pretty sure in the police station, I think that's where he talks to her at. I don't know.
There's a few. He talks to her in a few places. Yeah.
Well, I think they're on like the stairs or something, and he's just being a real freak to her, and it's really fucking.
I think that's actually at the university. Yeah.
Okay,
because she's freaking out about somebody IMing her, like messaging her.
Is number 2? No, I was trying to remember which one McDreamy is in.
That's number 3.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Derek Shepard, aka I can't remember his real name. He's only McDreamy.
So yeah. So I mean,
Patrick Dempsey, that's his name.
Yeah, Patrick Dempsey. So yeah, so I mean, we can go into number 3 now.
Yeah.
So number 3 for me is one of my favorites for pretty much up until the new one. And I mean, even still kind of now, number 3 has always been like my second favorite and a high second favorite because of the reasons that a lot of people don't like it. It leaned into the comedy a lot more. So you got a lot more of these comedic beats, but it was still like tense. It wasn't they didn't ratchet down the tenseness. Maybe they ratcheted down the horror a little bit, but because there was so much comedy that would then get undercut by, the scares or a kill or something going on that, it was this like, I don't know. For me, it worked on a better level because of the comedy that people don't like. People don't like the Jay and Silent Bob are in it, and I love that. I mean, being a big Kevin Smith fan, that was hilarious to me, and so for me, that was huge.
Well,
so,
and I mean, it's so weird to not enjoy, not necessarily not enjoy, but actively dislike something like that when these movies are active deconstructions of cinema and and the film industry, and having 90s figures like Jay and Silent Bob show up, and it's just like really they're here, and and it's just that kind of added level of like good lord,
well, and in a way that is actually talking about, because this one is actually set in Hollywood with the production of another Stab movie.
Yeah.
So we've got,
which is so good, because again,
go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I remember you telling me recently about how some people are separating them into. Oh wait, no, it wasn't you. It was one of my coworkers was talking to me about how a lot of people are separating them into Woodsboro movies and non-Woodsboro movies. And
there's only 2 that were non-Woodsboro, and there were 3 that were Woodsboro.
Yeah, and so but in regards to that, what I really like about number 3 is you get a little bit of both. You get a little bit of the Woodsboro house inside of the Hollywood set, and it's like really well done. And
I really like the scene where they're like in the set up house, and there's all these drops and doors that don't go anywhere.
So good. That sequence is so good.
And having her like kind of climbing on the inside of the scaffolding, to get away from Ghostface, and then having the whole the mother in the
body
bed.
bag thing.
Yeah, it was fucking crazy.
And because again, that's my thing, is that I really enjoyed this movie in particular because it, for all of the comedy it had, it really touched on the trauma that Sydney has with both her mother
this one
dying.
Was very much about the trauma. She moved out to the
house,
mountains and
all of that, and that's a huge plot point of the movie, is just how afraid she is, and how she doesn't want to confront this, and she doesn't want to have to go through this again. And the Woodsboro house moment is so critical to all of that. And just having it be this, honestly surreal experience of opening up doors to, no floors and running up to,
I feel like a part of that, too, is that she's, reliving that. When she's going through that. So she's expecting something to be behind that door, but there's nothing there. Yeah. So she's coming back to reality.
Well, because it was her house. It's a recreation of her house.
So I feel like there's a part of that where she's just expecting things to happen, and they're just not there.
Yeah, it was her
Yeah,
house
it's
because it
Cindy's
had
house.
the doors that like she would close like the closet door so that it wouldn't open up her bedroom door.
Yeah.
So this is her house.
Okay, sorry.
So
My
she,
bad.
yeah. So then, but this is also another aspect of it that's interesting too, because one, this is only one killer. This is the only movie with one killer in it, and but this one also has some almost supernatural aspects to it because she's having these dreams. She's getting this like somebody's messing with her outside her home. Somebody's messing like in the house. He's walking around under that body bag using her voice to like mess with her and like basically becoming the ghost of her mother.
I'm gonna be honest, I never realized that was Ghostface doing that shit. I literally thought that it was a ghost. I literally thought that was Cindy just going insane.
No.
Oh, well, I mean, it might have been a hallucination.
But it was her,
Yeah, that's
but
what
it was
I thought,
not,
was
though.
that it was a
him
hallucination.
messing with her.
No, because they reveal that later.
I guess I just didn't pay attention to
Yeah.
that part where they revealed it. But I literally just thought Cindy was hallucinating.
So after Scream 2 and we had the the revelation that they'd made a movie based on the events and Stab. Then we get to this movie where she's actually having to be around the cast and crew of these people who are making this movie about her life, and and meeting these people, meeting this like Parker Posey as this version of Gale Weathers, which I love. This was one of my favorite things. Is I love Parker Posey, and so getting to have her and Courtney Cox team up and investigate stuff was great. That whole sequence is just so much gold to me, and that's why I'm like, how can you not like this movie? Like, and I know people like it, but they just don't like it as much. But it's just like, but how? Why? This movie's so good. It's got so many good, like, goofy things like that.
But even with those goofy things, the writing is so well done, in my opinion, that it does such a good job about establishing some of the weirder things. Like the fact that the ending of the movie is in this like funhouse mansion of like opening doors and stuff like that, but it sets it up as this is a place where like this is a Hollywood mansion with a lot of secret rooms for like really like
the sex parties
like sex parties, and as well as
like a two-way mirror kind of thing,
like
in the bedroom,
like casting couch things and stuff.
So fucking freaky.
Well, it's almost like a hallway too, because they like go into the hallway and then it goes into the closet, and then they're behind it, and it's soundproof too, because they're banging on the inside like and like Dewey and Gale can't hear them, and meanwhile Ghostface is coming in and killing them in the and so and they don't know they're dying.
Because that's the thing, is that house, like when you get past the whole like Scooby-Doo-ness of that house.
This is probably the most Scooby-Doo of the movies too.
Like that house is actually genuinely a horror object in the movie as much as anything else, because you think about like it's again like the movie, like all the movies are commentaries on a lot of different things, and this movie is more or less a commentary on Hollywood itself.
Well, it's a commentary on Hollywood. It's a commentary on trilogies, of course. Like we get another Randy moment via tape this time, that we get the rules of the trilogy, and so. R.I.P. Randy. So we get this new set of rules that break it down for us. And, the killer's going to almost seem superhuman. You're going to get all this exposition, this backstory that you didn't know, that and it's true. And then like you really think about stuff like like Jedi. You think about these things. It's like, oh my god, trilogies are really like this. Oh my, what? Like,
also, it's really funny that you mentioned Jedi, because Carrie Fisher herself is in this fucking
movie. There's lots of little, and that's one of the things is like, people talk about this movie and they don't talk about, I mean, they do talk about it, but like, this is why I hate when people dismiss it as being just like dumb or not as good as the other one.
So there's this one scene from the movie that I didn't ever associate with number 3. I just associated it with Scream. So when I rewatched 3, I was like, oh, so this is the movie it's coming from. I always just had this memory of Scream in my head where they get a fax and they're stuck in the house, and then they start rolling down the hill, and then Ghostface is at the bottom and they're in a car and at the car, and then he goes under the car and then he's gone.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Like, what is that entire fucking sequence? Like, that is a fucking insane sequence where where it's the fax machine, and then it's the fucking oil, like the gas, and then the fire, and then they're all fucking rolling down the hill, barely alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. The fax scene sticks with me a lot too.
No,
for whatever reason.
And again,
And
I think you guys
small,
remember
like,
this
shiny
one.
girl going, "Dewey?"
Can you guys
whatever.
tell that we really like Scream 3?
Yeah.
We
Well-
disagree with everyone who doesn't like it.
What I think part of
I
it
feel
is
like it's also just because you watched
that's what I was
it a
going to
ton,
say.
so that's
is because
like part
Scream
of our
3 was one of my
memory.
favorites, and I watched it a lot because it's great, and so because it's funny, because it's fun, it's funny. It takes everything from the first two movies, twists it all, changes the narrative, and ends things on a good note or whatever. But it's just fun to me, and
it brings back Dewey's theme.
no.
It doesn't?
No, that one doesn't have Dewey's theme.
Never mind
But
then.
It doesn't?
I don't think so. I don't
Pretty
remember.
sure it does.
I
I'm
don't
pretty
think
sure
so.
it has the broken arrow.
All right, well, I'll have to. It's actually been a little bit since I've watched it, so. But yeah, I used to watch it a lot when you guys were kids. This is probably the one I watched the most when you guys were kids, and so this is probably why you guys remember it so much.
The fax part of it almost seemed kind of like a Final Destination scene. So
Yeah, kind of. I guess.
Yeah, a
Like-
little bit. Well, I mean, it's shot like a Final Destination.
Yeah,
scene
that's what I
where
mean.
It shows the gas line, and then it shows
yeah.
the
Oh god, that's a great camera.
Yeah.
Well, and because they're having to sit there and the lights go out and they're like, oh my god, we're getting script pages. What's this? And then they're like read it. Which again, okay, how was the fax working when the lights, like all the power was out? How was the fax machine still working?
I mean,
Everybody.
I guess they could have turned off.
That's
like,
a
certain
quibble I have with
breaker-
it.
Like breaker.
Yeah, they
stuff.
could have just turned off one breaker or like the breakers to the lights or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then they're like, having to read like, oh my god, they got to get out of the house. What? And then like, some of them realize before, and then
just disintegrate.
one of them doesn't. Yeah, but no, this one was such a fun movie for me and you guys, because this one came out in 2000. So Harrison, you would have been 3 when it came out.
And I would have been -2.
Yes, but because I love the movies, we watched them a lot, and you got to see them a lot. But this can lead us into number 4 now. And number 4 is probably the one I've seen the least out of them because I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like it. I like what it says. It's this one is a meta narrative about fame and about internet fame, like creating your brand online or whatever, because throughout it you get the two guys who are constantly like video blogging and
You mean vlogging?
vlogging. Yeah.
Vlogging before vlogging was a
Yeah.
thing.
So, well, no, I think at the time it was a thing because this was what 2010, 2011. I can't remember the actual year.
Oh, okay. Well, then
So-
yeah, it would have just been.
Yeah. So I mean, we were in the social media. Well, yes, we were in the social media age. Twitter was out. Facebook was out. Probably MySpace was still around, but whatever. But so we have these guys walking around creating this like always talking about horror movies, always like and they grew up in Woodsboro in the aftermath of all these killings. And for them at least, the only killings that happened in town were the original killings. The stuff at the university and the stuff in Hollywood, that was slightly removed. And in this one, Sydney's coming back. She's doing a book tour. This is the last stop on her book tour. And she's doing it in Woodsboro. And of course, what the fuck's happening? Ghostface is on the loose again. So, and this time, again, this is a meta narrative on fame, trying to get famous for whatever reasons you want to get famous for. And spoiler alert, Jill, her cousin, is the killer, and she wants to be famous like Sydney for being a victim who survives. And we get and that's what was great was we get Randy 2.0 in a way with Kirby, who's also like the boys know horror, but she fucking trounces them, and we get some great stuff with her. By this point, the relationship between Dewey and Gale in the third movie they hadn't quite gotten together yet,
Yeah.
But between the third and the fourth movie, they had gotten married, and their marriage was good. She was just dissatisfied with living in Woodsboro.
Yeah,
She wanted to still be out being the Gale Weathers that she always was.
Yeah.
And Dewey was content just being the sheriff of Woodsboro, and that just rubbed against them the wrong way. They were just incompatible in that way, and so that was kind of the stuff going in with that one. But this one, like I said, I haven't watched as much, so I don't have as I like it a lot, but I don't have as deep connection to it as the first three.
I've only watched it once.
Katrina only literally watched it today before the episode. So
I honestly consider it the weakest
Really?
film of the, what would it be now? The quintupology.
the Scream Saga.
Yeah, the Scream Saga. I would say that it's the weakest of the Scream Saga. And
Scraga.
But it's not bad. No. Like, again, there isn't a bad Scream movie. It's just that I consider it the weakest one because the central narrative of it seems very... It feels kind of jumpy to me a little bit, where it's jumping between Dewey being sheriff and like kind of having to like manage the whole town and actually like try to make sure that like there's enough security around it, while Gail is doing her investigative journalism and she's going to like the barn party and like all that stuff. And then Sydney is honestly, like, that's the thing, is like, I haven't watched it as often as the others, but I really don't remember what Sydney was doing beyond.
Sydney was trying to protect her cousin.
Yeah.
Right. Sydney was trying to protect her cousin from it. Right.
Irony.
Angel of Death, as the one character says.
Yeah.
Olivia.
And so, so my ranking pre-new one was 1, 3, 4, and 2. Because I do think that 4 is a stronger movie than 2 is, in my personal opinion. Again, this is what I was saying before, that the best movies are the ones that talk about something new in horror. And this was talking about, like, fame, and getting that internet fame or whatever. And not something new necessarily in horror, but something new in movies or culture or something else like that. And so it's referencing the older movies. You're still getting the Stab stuff because they're watching Stab at the barn. And so you're still getting that reference to the Stab movies, to the original killings and everything.
One thing I did like about 4 is its start. I like that it starts off with the like stab 4, stab 5, and then like it just goes and goes and goes, and like you see this like de-evolution of the Stab movies themselves,
because
also
it's
kind
a
of
fourth...
falling into like the traps of like multiple horror sequels.
Right, because it's the 4th movie in a franchise, then you're like, okay, well, we're kicking this dead horse again. Do we have something new to say? Well, yes, we do actually. With Scream, they did have something new to say, and that was what was great. And I saw somebody mention that Scream works best with distance. With every new one coming out, you want to give it a few years to speak about something new in horror, in the culture, in movies in general.
That's why the second one was just kind of...
I think, and that's why I think the second one is a little bit weaker. It's a good movie. Again, it's a great movie, but I think it's weaker because it doesn't have as much to say. Yes, it has stuff to say about sequels, but not so much about anything else on another level, whereas the other ones...
culturally or horror genre.
Right. And I mean, people can argue the same thing with number 3, because that came out in 2000, which was 3 years after the second one. But I think that one had a little bit of distance to it that you could talk about, trilogies. You could talk about, horror in general at that point, because you could talk about Hollywood. Yeah. And the way they pump out the trilogies, the sequels and stuff like that. That one itself was really talking about, because the second one couldn't really talk about sequels so much because it was talking about Stab 1. That was the only one they could reference. And then the new one in number 3, they could talk about the Stab franchise and how at that point it was spinning its wheels. And so, now we're at number 4 and it's really spinning its wheels. And so, at least with the Scream movies, they have weathered it and come up with something new and interesting and fun each time. Even with number 4 being my least watched, is still, for me, a great movie because it does have something new to say and it brings new characters, but with your favorites in there. Again, the people who've survived it. Again, you've got Dewey, you've got Gail, you've got Sydney, and you get this batch of new characters to like and to cheer for and, you know, get sad over their deaths or whatever, and you get a new motivation for the killer. And so that's not necessarily connected to any of the original motivation, because the first 3 are definitely about Sydney's family and the repercussions of all of that. Whereas this one, I mean, yes, number 4 is Sydney's family again, but it's this somebody trying to glom on to her fame more than anything else. You know, oh, Sydney's going to be the one who dies, and now I get to be the new Sydney.
Yeah.
It's interesting for me in that way, and I enjoy it. I just haven't watched it as much as I did the other 3, like I said. So Katrina just saw it today and was a little bit more fresh on it. Any insights?
I was not expecting it to be the guy who it was at the end.
Oh, yeah.
I was
her
not
second,
expecting that, yeah.
They do a decent job in that movie covering up his involvement.
Yeah.
I already knew it was going to be the cousin because I read the synopsis like on the way to go see the new one.
Right.
Because I needed context.
Well, and here's another thing that I think is interesting, too, because, I mean, we don't get, like, in the horror world, Neve Campbell is definitely a scream queen of sorts, for sure. But, like, you know, people are really starting to hype it a lot more recently, I think. Not that they ever weren't, but because she doesn't really do much else in the horror world, and she's got just this franchise, that people haven't really given her, some people haven't given her due props. But I also think that, here's the thing, Emma Roberts has done a lot in horror too, and we don't talk about her enough. She was on Scream Queens, she was in The Black Coat's Daughter, she's in lots of horror stuff that she was in American Horror Story. So she definitely is not getting, she gets it here and there, but I definitely don't hear a lot of people talking about her being as big a horror icon as I think she really is. I think she's more of a horror icon than a lot of people have given her credit for. So that was kind of what was great too about it, is because I think it's one of her first things in horror, and since then she's gone on and done more, and so she obviously enjoys the genre, and I think, yeah, like I said, I think she deserves more credit for that, because I mean, she did great in it.
Yeah.
So, but overall, I love the Scream franchise. You know, we're gonna go ahead and talk about the 5th one here in a moment, but we're wrapping up the original 4 right now. Any last thoughts on the original 4?
Like I said, all great films. They do a great job at what they do, and I think that our culture is better for having them. It gives you something to consider while you're watching your horror movie about the greater tropes of horror, as well as just the greater tropes of cinema.
Well, because it's not just a mindless, like, you know, slasher that you're just watching for the fun kills and whatever else. You know, and there's nothing wrong with those. I love those. But this is one that, like you said, it's a deconstruction. It's got the meta narratives. It's got all this stuff that goes into it that gives it these more layers that you can chew into that are more fun and interesting than just a regular slasher is.
It's elevated horror.
I was gonna say that too.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna use that, because a lot of people talk about elevated horror and Hereditary and Get Out, all these movies. I in a way, I'll give it that. You know, I think that there is a certain elevation to it. Nobody in the horror community, like in the true horror fans, hate the term elevated horror, because it doesn't matter if it's elevated or not. Like it's that's the thing for people to say, to sit there and go, oh, well, we can give this movie an award, the Hereditary an award, but we're not going to give these other movies the awards because they're just cheap schlock. In this way, your definition for this, I do believe, is elevated horror, because it definitely elevates the genre in good ways. It's not like in any way dismissing the genre.
No,
it embraces it and in all its forms and moves it forward.
As much as it's a deconstruction, it's a celebration of
exactly.
horror and those tropes.
Yeah.
And that's why it points at them, because
Yeah.
it's like, hey, this is a genre that we all watch, we all love, and we know you watch it because you wouldn't get these
the references.
like these references or these like playing on the tropes that we do in these movies otherwise.
Right.
And so this is Scream, more than a lot of other franchises, is definitely a movie series for the viewer,
For the fans.
like for the viewers of those movies. It's a mystery to solve while you're watching the film. It just kind of plays on all of your expectations.
Yeah.
So.
It's because, like, for me personally, I think when I view Scream, I'm not viewing it as this extended, like, other universe that's not, like, that has, like, this crazy killer Michael Myers or this Freddy Krueger with, like, this scissor hands, whatever. So it's like, shut up. I'm not as into horror as you.
Edward Freddy Hands?
Yes,
Freddy Scissorhands?
Yes. Shut up. Anyways, so I think that because it's more relatable, and so it's also in our universe because it mentions these horror movies,
Right.
so that we can relate to it, and so
Right.
it makes me feel like I'm not just watching some random movie. I'm
Right.
watching people in my own world experience this, even though I know it's like
Right.
it's like another universe,
Right.
basically.
No, it
But
feels realistic.
It's extended from our own.
Right. Well, and that's like whenever you watch a zombie movie or a vampire movie and they have no concept of what vampires or zombies are, and you're just like, what? Like, you've never had any zombie or
Walkers.
vampire. Yeah, you call them walkers or whatever. And that's fine, but I always like it more when something happens like that. They come across vampires or they come across zombies and they're like, oh my god, that's a zombie, and they know what it is because they've experienced it in pop culture.
I like that
or
one movie. Was that one movie with Michael Cera and
Zombieland.
yeah, was that, did they call them zombies?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and yeah, I mean, to that point where it's those movies in particular, it's more.
That wasn't
more,
Michael Cera. That was Jesse Eisenberg. But I know what you were
Same
talking about. Yeah.
difference.
my
People are gonna hate
my
me.
Yeah, they are.
Don't care.
You're not the only one who gets them confused.
Jesse Eisenberg was the one, and this is the end, right? Just kidding. I know
Oh my
that.
god, stop.
When it comes to stuff like that with vampires and zombies and things like that, that's also opportunities to deconstruct horror and have your vampires or zombies be different and have them like try to shoot the zombies in the head, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or you try to stake the
that
vampire
would
in
be
the
so
heart and it
cool.
does nothing. And and then it's like you kind of have to like you create your own rules and everything.
Yeah.
And so like that's opportunities to be creative and like do something different with these creatures that we know.
It's
'Cause
honestly scarier if you
again,
shoot a zombie in the head and it doesn't fucking die. That's scarier.
Yeah.
well, and beyond that, it also then means that we are more invested in the characters because the characters are experiencing these revelations at the same time we are, versus us seeing someone shoot a zombie in the head for the first time and they have no idea what a zombie is.
Right.
And we're all just like, okay, yeah. And like because we all know that you kill a zombie when you shoot him in the head, but they don't. And then the moment so we're just sitting there until they figure it out and so it's
Well, that's like
for
when
the point of Scream. Like Scream is a very approachable, very like true to life kind of slasher film where it's like we are in the same seats as the people in the movie in terms of them trying to figure out who Ghostface is.
And like
what
we
his
said,
motivation
that
is.
the killers are using the tropes, and so and the people trying to survive are trying to figure out the tropes or whatever, and so they're using that knowledge of horror movies in each movie. They're using the knowledge of horror movies to their advantage. You know, and so that's what makes these movies great, is that it exists in a world like ours, and you can imagine that this would actually happen, that some killer out there would actually use this kind of knowledge to stage this kind of stuff. And that's what makes, I think, Scream also so successful, is because it could be our world, because it could happen like that. It gives you that, like, oh my God, you know, this is, you know, that. And then also, you know, then it talks about the movies, you know, because we've seen that plenty of times. Movies about incidences that, you know, a lot of, like, not a lot, but there are some horror movies that are based on real events, you know, that things have happened that, you know, somebody twisted.
Conjuring.
Like,
Ghostface is based on a real life serial killer.
there were,
Gainesville Ripper, he's inspired
Yeah.
by that killer.
Yeah, you're
so
right.
he's like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
well, and then, like, you know, Leatherface and Norman Bates and stuff are based off of Ed Gein. So there's people in real life that sometimes they take that story and they twist it in a way that is unrecognizable to the original thing, but is still, you know, comes off of that real world thing. And so that's what makes Ghostface interesting too. Like you said, there is a real world, not basis, but a real world.
There's a reality.
It's an inspiration.
Yeah, real world inspiration for it. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. But that's another reason these movies are great, is because, like you said, great insight was that because they're real world, feel like they're in a real world to us. They're not. It's not a hyper reality.
And they touch on topics that we touch on in real life. They're not, like, just kind of hovering over these important topics about horror or Hollywood or fame. They're touching on them and they're talking about them.
Right.
And so Scream and the most recent 2019 Black Christmas both feel like they're in our world somewhat because they're talking about these important topics.
Right.
So
Yeah, I agree. All right. So I think that brings us to the end of the Scream 1 through 4 discussion. For anybody who doesn't want to be spoiled on the new movie, I suggest you stop here, and we'll catch up with you next time. So stay creepy. All right, and for everybody who has stuck around, we're going to jump into some quick Scream 2022 goodness. We all, I think, enjoyed it immensely.
it was a great theater experience, I will say. If you have not seen it yet, go see it in the theaters before it.
If you can. If you can. Yeah. We understand with COVID and everything, theaters are closed.
Wear a mask, get vaccinated.
Exactly. You know, with everything going on, you know, I wish they had done VOD. There's so much. I mean, we can get into an argument about this all day long, but if you can, go see it. If you can't, great. But if you're here listening to this, you probably did watch it.
The best times to go see the movie are during weekdays in the mornings.
Right.
Those are the best times.
Which is hard for some people to do, but if you can, I mean, again, if you're listening to this, hopefully you've already seen it. Yeah. So, because we're going to spoil some stuff. But
in either case, great film and very well done.
I
don't know if I'm disappointed or ecstatic at the fact that I guessed the killer before the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So Katrina,
hold on. When did you guess who the killer was? In the middle of the movie? Like while you were in the theater?
In the theater while I was watching the movie. Because I specifically chose not to try and look at the characters to try and figure out who the killer would be. Because I knew there would probably be some giveaway.
So again, real quick, both of you guys work in a movie theater, so you have access to posters and you guys see stuff that not necessarily much before anybody else. But Katrina, go ahead.
As soon as we had the second version of the Scream poster come up, the one where it says the killer is on this poster and it has all of the cast in front of a big ghost face mask, I guessed who it was on that day, that first day that we had it up. Which was
she
December
sent me a
22nd.
picture of the poster and a text saying, I think it's this person.
Yeah. And I I'm so glad I have a receipt of that because I'm never going to stop talking about it. This is the one thing I'm gonna. This is the thing I'm gonna tell at parties if I ever go to any. That's the thing. So
well, for myself, it was more of a kind of like adrenaline fueled thrill moment for myself when I was in the middle of the theater kind of watching it, because there's a point in the movie where they discuss how whoever assaulted Tara in the first scene of the movie must be bruised to hell. And I mean, yes, I mean, there's a moment where they get like thrown onto a counter in that scene, which was hilarious, by the way. Laughed out loud in the theater when that happened. But
well, and again, we go back to the Ghostface is a human person who can
exactly
get hurt,
they're a fallible
yeah
killer. In regards to the bruising, they mention how one character is bruised and it's a red herring. But after that point, I was really keen on trying to find people who had bruising because I felt like that was a clue. I felt like that was the writers leaving a clue to look for the
somebody
audience to kind of
bruised,
try to find someone else who's bruised, but it's very like they leave it like kind of innocuous and not in a very obvious place. And sure enough, during the scene where everyone's inside of Tara's hospital room, all the friends are there, they do a kind of like pan across the hospital room from right to left. And God, I'm blanking on names, but it's Amber.
Amber,
right?
yeah.
Yes,
Amber.
Amber. You get a moment where you look into her blouse a little bit, and you just see that her entire upper chest is bruised to hell. It's just red and
which I didn't
brown.
catch. Yeah.
And I caught it, and I stuck with it for the rest of the movie, where I was like, if it's her, I knew it and I called it.
Right.
And I actually saw something, because that's the thing, is like when you're watching the movie, you never know if you're actually seeing something or if you're just making stuff up because you want to see something. But I went in not really considering who might be the killer or not.
Right.
I didn't look at the poster. I wanted to kind of go in a little bit blind.
And I try not to, whenever I'm watching these movies, I try not to guess who it is, because
Me
I just
neither.
like the enjoyment of it unfolding.
Exactly.
And that's how I am with most movies, especially like any kind of mystery thing where they're trying to figure out who the killer is or whatever. And I'm not just like, I just like to let it unfold and let me figure it. Like, don't just tell me the story. I like that part of it. I don't like trying to figure it out myself, because one, I'm probably not going to figure it out. And two, if I do figure it out, it's probably going to disappoint me in some way. It's like when I watched Malignant and I knew what was going on from the opening credits. And so I kept waiting for the reveal in that movie. And when it finally happened, I was like, yeah, I called it. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's just one of those things. Now, and like I'm in this one, obviously, you guys both calling Amber like that was great, especially Katrina calling it from the poster. She's just like, that person looks shady.
There was someone like so far in the background, and everyone was like, no, that's not her. Like, that couldn't be her because she's like, blah, blah, blah. I think it's this person. Literally, I asked people after the movie came out, like, I asked, like, maybe 3 people, like, a few days ago who they thought it was on the poster, and they all said fucking Sydney. What the fuck?
What?
Do you not know Scream?
Yeah, Sydney wouldn't be the killer in any way, shape, or form.
They were like, I think
it
it's
wouldn't be
Sydney.
any
And
of the
then
3.
after I said no, they were like, okay, well, what about the girl on the left? It was fucking Gail. No, bitch. That's so fucking annoying.
Why
Do you
would it
not
be
know
any
Scream?
of the original 3 people? Like, why? Like, that just baffles me. Why would anybody?
I'm
I mean,
so-
that's
I'm
obviously
so
people
mad.
who haven't watched the
On the
series very much.
subject-
If any of my coworkers listen to this, I'm sorry, but that was just fucking stupid.
When it came to that poster, I was just playing the Ghostface is right there
Yeah,
on
which
the
is what a lot
poster.
of people were doing. Like, everybody was like, yeah, Ghostface is on the thing. Of course, he's the killer. Duh.
But on the subject of the main 3, I think that not talking about the Broken Arrow size.
Oh my god!
Size.
I was so happy.
Sized elephant in the room.
No. Okay, so they brought back the theme for Broken Arrow for Dewey when he shows up again. I was so happy.
It was so subtle and so quiet
because
too.
Katrina and
and it was melded into the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And
so Katrina and I watched it together. Harrison got to watch it on a
like that.
Yeah, so Harrison got to watch it on a employee
I watched it a couple days earlier.
Yeah,
before.
well, the night before. You got to watch it the night before we did, and so then Katrina and I got to watch it the next evening, and like when that happened, I got so excited. I was like nudging Katrina. I was like, "Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!" And so because
a few other people in the audience noticed it too.
Yeah.
And were like laughing. So
Yeah,
it wasn't just us.
No. So it was great, and that's again another reason why sometimes it's good to like be with an audience. We had some people in front of us that were kind of like, somebody was on their phone a lot during the whole movie, and then they got like loud and rowdy at one point, so I couldn't hear a part, and so it kind of frustrated me. But
the part where Gail or somebody is threatening Amber at the very end, and
Yeah,
she's like kind of like cornered up against the cabinet, and she's pleading for her life.
Right.
Couldn't hear jack shit what she was saying.
Yeah. So I can't wait for video so I can actually watch it and enjoy the full thing without interruption. But yeah, so the Dewey thing was great, like that, and for me, Dewey was the best returning character. Dewey has always been one of my favorite characters because, he's lovable. He's a goofball, but
he's the emotional resident.
Yeah, and so he's the heart of it all.
Sydney's the target.
Well, Sydney's the. I wouldn't say she's the target, but Sydney's the. I guess the emotional core of it all because it's always been tied to her.
She's by what I mean by target is that she's the central plot figure typically, where it's just the whole
Dewey's
plot
always been
circles
to
around
me
her,
the heart of the group, and he's the one that just his emotions are always on his sleeve. He cares so much about them all, and
also it's just this journey of like. A guy getting injured and getting permanent disability, from all
and
of these,
booted from like forced to retire, and then like his marriage obviously failed after the last movie, like sometime between the two, and he still pines after his wife, and they obviously still care for each other a lot. She didn't want to be in Woodsboro, and he wanted to stay in Woodsboro. That was what was great, and I knew this was going to be the movie that one of them was finally going to die. And I knew that it was as much as it was going to hurt me, that I knew it had to be Dewey. Because Gail wouldn't have carried as much weight. Gail has always been like the kind of like bitchy person. So a lot of people would have been, don't get me wrong, it would have still been like, oh man, that sucks, she died. But not as much as Dewey dying, especially because Dewey's
the gut punch.
Yeah, Dewey was really the gut punch. Because, I mean, if Sydney dies, like you said, in a way, Sydney's always been the target. So Sydney dying would have been an inevitability, in a way. That her chances ran out. And so
Sydney would have, if I had to go through the emotions I would have felt if any of them had died, it would have been Sydney. I would have been somewhat mad. Like I would have been somewhat angry that Sydney died because I would have, and not like mad at the people who made the movie. No, I'd be mad at Ghostface. Like I'd be like I would have actually.
This one finally managed to take her out.
Yeah, and they would have really had to have sold me on why this Ghostface was the one to get Sydney.
Right. Yeah.
And so that would have really.
Well, and
that would have put the movie on a little bit of like rocky water for me, where it would have been like you really would have had to have had a compelling Ghostface for this. Whereas with Dewey, that's the emotional gut punch. That's the like we just lost the good-hearted character that has been through all of this franchise so far.
Well, his sister died in the first one. It's just like
rough.
He's watched his friends die. He survived Ghostface so many times. He's been stabbed and hurt so many times by these Ghostfaces. It's just like, oh my god, and they all have. But and he went down fighting too.
Yeah.
Like he took out. Like, he knocked that Ghostface down and was like, okay, I'm coming back. You have to kill them in the head. You have to shoot them in the head or they're not going to not actually dead, because he knew. Fucking bulletproof vests. And so, but going back like that and going down like he did, like, just was like, oh my God, that hurts so bad. And it was just like, that hurt me. I was upset about that. But he was the one who had to die of the group. That if you're going to kill somebody and move that, he was probably the one that needed to die.
Because Gail to me has always been the...
She's been the harder-edged one.
That's the thing. Is like Gail's always been the one who always steps into danger anyway.
Yeah.
And so if Gail died, it would have just been like, well,
yeah.
Like it would have been
and it would have been like
you really
Dewey's
kind of put yourself out there.
Dewey's the cop, but like Dewey was the cop, like the good cop that cared about his friends, cared about everything. And put himself in harm's way, so much so that he's like, permanently disabled and everything for so many, issues and everything. But, to go out swinging like he did was just awesome. I mean, it was a good death.
It was a good ending.
Yeah.
It was
a fucking brutal death,
it
though.
was
like,
brutal. Which again brings me to, because we know it was Amber because the other killer, Richie, was in the hallway with them. And so we knew it had to be Amber.
Richie.
And so, which to me is kind of like the strength it took to like plunge both of those knives in and pull up like she did. Like, I mean, adrenaline's a hell of a thing.
She almost lifted him off the ground.
Yeah,
and I mean, she wasn't knocked unconscious, and I could justify it.
Yeah,
but it like more than anything about that sequence, that final shot sticks with me so much. Of just the menacing ghost face with standing over Dewey's body with two knives, both dripping blood.
That was a great shot.
Just in the hospital hallway. Like,
I want
a
poster of that. Like, I'm not even gonna lie.
Good. It's so good.
Yeah.
Great directing, great cinematography in that moment.
That one, that's a great image.
Props to everyone who was working on that scene.
Yeah, that for me is one of the more iconic images of the whole series.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And
again, like, it should be like that was the death of one of the major characters, and for it to linger on that moment and not just kind of rush away from it and just be like, all right, stab, rip, and then we're cut away to the new characters. Like, the fact that we actually had a moment to actually see it, and again,
and mourn a little bit.
And mourn, but like also.
To be afraid.
To be afraid.
Like, this ghost face, this is the one that killed Dewey. And this one is like standing up, two knives in its hand, just like, so menacing and everything.
And said, like, it was a pleasure or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It was an honor.
Yeah, it was an honor, so.
Well, and...
It was like, and then, okay, so then we get a new tech. Because they were using something that was on their throat, like something that was part of their, like, around their neck or whatever, that they clicked on to make their voice sound while they're walking around, so they didn't have to hold it in their hand, so they could hold their knives and be completely, hands-free with that. And so that upped the game a lot for me, too. I was like, oh, that's fucking awesome. So.
But yeah, no, I just, in general, that scene, it, oh, right, that was what I was going to say. We needed to know that Dewey was dead. Yeah. Because if they had cut away too soon, or if it was just one stab, there could have been the, well, we didn't see Dewey die, and, like, he could still be alive. But, like, the fact that it was, like, so brutal, and we lingered there with Ghostface standing above the dead body, and we didn't see him move. We didn't see anything, and it was just like that was Dewey's end, and for what it's worth, he got them out of there, and
he was able to save them,
help them out
for a little while.
And to be fair, like, to your point about being terrified of this Ghostface, I actually kind of believe that, for at least myself, these were one of the more terrifying ghost faces, because they genuinely seemed, so with 2, 3, and 4, they all seem a little crazy, but they're not as wild as Stu and Billy were. Like, Stu and Billy were bonkers in the first one.
Billy was, for sure, and I think Stu was
pretty bonkers. I mean, he was going along with it,
no. I'm not dismissing it. And we got to talk about some Stu here.
But with this one, like, they are genuinely like, and again, the movie points at it because this movie is a commentary on fandoms.
Toxic fandoms,
and
yes.
Toxic fandoms and crazed fandoms. And to that point, these two killers are insane. Like, they are absolutely insane in how much of fans they are about the Stab franchise and about how they want to inspire the next one and everything. And so
they want to bring it back to the originals. They want to bring it back to the to what Stab was truly all about.
They
because
are
this
not just fans; they are fanatics.
So this is what we haven't talked about yet, and this is what we were talking about before.
Reboot
was
of Stab.
this was the commentary on elevated horror, because what happened was, in this universe, Stab 8 was directed by the director of that Knives Out guy, which was a commentary on Rian Johnson having directed the eighth Star Wars movie, which divided fans pretty harshly, and so. That in itself, but then also talking about elevated horror, because you go back to the beginning, Tara can't, because this Ghostface is recreating the beginning of the first movie, doing the scary trivia, the horror movie trivia, and she can't get the answers right because she doesn't watch
old
slashers. Well, no, she doesn't watch slashers. She watches the Babadook and Hereditary. She watches the elevated horror. So this is talking about that. And then number 8 of the Stab franchise was like, oh, well, we're going to take it into an elevated horror thing. We're not going to, that's how they were talking about it. And then, so it takes it in a different direction than what they were doing. But I also want to talk about the beginning, going back to that beginning too, because this is the first movie where we actually get the first victim who actually survives. Survives all that. We did not expect her to survive, but she was actually in the hospital, and she survives through the whole movie, which is crazy. We that. So again, we're flipping the script on things. We're changing the narrative of what these, and that's what's great about Scream is that each movie changes something in its own narrative to expand it, to evolve it. To the next level, to the next generation, I guess. But you're getting, and they talk about the requel. We get the Meeks Martin.
It's also a commentary on requels.
You get these
your Halloween,
Ghostbusters, Halloween 2018. You get Ghostbusters Afterlife. You get all these movies that are take the original people, bring them back, but introduce new people too.
It's not Halloween without Laurie.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not Scream unless you get Sidney, Dewey, and Gale. So but we got a bunch of new characters. We got the niece and nephew of Randy. Lots of great cameos, including audio cameos by Matthew Lillard. He did a voice in the Stab 8 section on the YouTube thing, with the ghost face with the flamethrower. He's the voice of that. And then he also has a voice as one of the people at the house later on at his house at the party. He's like, he says something to the effect of, this is a nice house or something. So in reference to his own house, And then Jamie Kennedy, who played Randy, also gets a voice cameo. He's like, he's the guy who says some goofy person's dad is here, or somebody's goofy dad is here to kick us all out. So, and then the to Wes part where they're toasting to Wes who died there. It was also a to Wes Craven moment, where they got a bunch of voices from people who were in the movies earlier, some of the other actors and actresses who were in the other movies, to honor Wes Craven for that part in that movie too. So it's really cool. And then we also find out there's a bit where there's a screen for YouTube or something like that references Kirby from Scream 4, that she's alive. Oh, nice. So it because people were really jockeying for her to come back. They really wanted, because you don't see her die. She just disappears. And so it was good to see that she still alive. I was bummed because they kept teasing Stu. They kept talking about
so many red herrings.
It was such a red herring, and I think that they were doing that because so many people wanted Stu to come back. That there was the possibility that having the TV dropped on his head didn't kill him. I mean, it's possible. But they kept dismissing him. Like throughout the whole movie,
Yeah.
they were like, "Oh, well, Billy Loomis." Well, also Stu was there, and then Dewey was like, "Oh, yes, Stu was just his like hanger on or whatever. He was his accomplice." But Stu was like one of the major killers too. It's like Stu was a killer. Yes, he was being manipulated or being whatever
Used by
Billy, but he was still a major part of it. And so I kept hoping that he was going to come back, that he was the guy who was ultimately behind everything. So when it was Richie, I was a little let down, especially because it was the boyfriend again.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, not again, the boyfriend.
For what it's worth, he was a really sinister boyfriend when it was revealed. Like,
Well, and he did really good at playing off like he wasn't the whole time,
Yeah.
too. Like, he was really good. Jack Quaid is a great actor.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't seen The Boys on Amazon Prime, that is a great show, and he's one of the main characters on that, if not the main character. But he was great in this. Everybody was really great. I love the new cast. I love the Meeks Martin twins, just everybody. Jenna Ortega as Tara. They were just all great. And Jenna Ortega's also becoming this new young horror icon. She's been in a few things. She's been in Scream. She's going to be in the Netflix Addams Family series Wednesday, where she's going to be playing Wednesday. So that'll be interesting. The one who played Mindy Meeks Martin, she was on Yellow Jackets. She played Thaisa on that. So it was kind of a awesome thing. She's on one of the most talked about shows right now, and also had like the #1 movie for that week and everything. It was getting like, so it's great that it was a great cast. I loved what they were talking about. Like we said, that they were talking about toxic fandom, that these guys were so wrapped up in what the Stab movies were, and how they thought the later ones deviated from it, and they wanted to get it back to the original narrative in a way. And so that's why they were doing it in Stu's house. They were doing it they were trying to pin it all on the daughter of Billy Loomis, the illegitimate daughter of Billy Loomis. And so you were getting, or the unknown daughter of Billy Loomis. So they were trying to bring it all back to the original, which again, you think that this isn't a part of all of that saga of Sydney and everybody else, but it really is. It's still all tied to it so deeply that it was great the way they connected it. A little fun tidbit also, the girl Amber, she goes up in flames there, and she's all burnt and everything. Similar fate happened to her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She's the one who gets flamethrowered.
That's funny.
The actress played that character in that movie, so she gets
felt like
flamethrowered.
I'd seen
So
her
it's
somewhere.
two movies where she's gotten flambéed like that. So we need another movie for her, so she has an unofficial
Flaming trilogy.
flaming trilogy.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, just good movie. Definitely watch it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it, please don't be listening to this right now.
Yeah.
Because we have spoiled the hell out of it. But yeah, if you...
watch it again.
Yeah, watch it again.
Yeah, just watch it again.
Oh, I can't wait for it. I cannot wait for it to come out on video so that we can watch it again, because I need to watch it again. I
just need you to watch it again, so that way I need to know if I'm right about those bruises.
I know, I've looked it up and I can't find it anywhere. So if it would have been there, I feel like it
maybe you
would
guys
have been
need to
referenced.
go into the theater around that time, just go in and
maybe I
take a
imagine
look.
some bruising.
I mean, you still got it right either
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
but still.
Well, and I think that's what's good too. Again, that Richie, you could maybe call him, but I don't think anybody did. When you're thinking about it, like like you guys said, you guys both called Amber, but you guys didn't call the other killer.
I didn't.
No,
And so-
I like literally during like a part of the movie, I was like, I like him.
Yeah,
I literally said,
you
I
did.
like
made him
You
funny.
leaned over and you're like,
Yeah.
They made him funny, and like that was honestly one of the best things they could have done to misdirect you about his character, was to make him the funny guy.
well, and that was the thing too. Like in the first one, Billy is sinister throughout it. Like you question it the whole time. Like you're like, and they keep trying to veer you off of him, but they're very pointedly
even Stu has that one moment with Randy in the video store. That's they make it pretty
obvious, but at the same time, but then they start veering off with red herrings, and you're like, because that is the thing in that first movie, you're like, I think it's one of them, and then and then you're like, oh no, maybe it is somebody else, maybe it's this person, maybe it's that person, and then you're like, oh shit, it really was them.
Yeah.
Oh, but it was both of them, you
Yeah.
know. And in this movie, you're just thrown off completely because he seems like such a caring guy, and you know he's funny, and he's trying to get out of there, blah blah blah, and you know, but meanwhile he's been manipulating everything.
I think the first moment where I started to kind of question his motivations was when he was in the car and he didn't want to pick up the inhaler because and again that's very late in the movie. That's
Yeah.
like moments before the reveal
Yeah.
of his character, and so I mean it's kind of like it's not that much of a like prediction by any means,
Right.
but it was like for what it's worth they made me suspicious, and
Well,
so
and I did like how they, when we get to the house at the end and the party and everything, the way that it's shot and everything, you don't know it's the same house at first. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
you know from the trailers that house is
Yeah.
going to be in the movie, but you're kind of thrown off because you're just enjoying the movie and everything. So I was like,
yeah, I
I
didn't
wasn't even like,
realize
yeah.
that was
And so they're
Steve's
filming
house.
it in ways that you don't notice it because they've moved
They
furniture
changed
differently.
the angles.
They
Yeah, they
wait
changed the angles.
they wait until the moment that Sydney walks in through the door.
Yeah,
that they
And
start
it's like,
to shoot
and
it.
they pull
in the
back out, and then
exact-
you're like, it's Stu's house, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh my god,
Yeah.
You know, so especially for
like the
anybody.
moment you see
Like,
that
there's
closet under
definitely
the
some
stairs, you're like,
moments.
yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely some moments that you can definitely realize that it's the same house, but the angles that they shoot it at aren't the same angles
Yeah.
that they do in the first movie, so it makes it
Exactly.
different.
All right. Well, I think we've talked quite a bit about these movies. We're running close to the 2-hour mark. This is probably going to be our longest episode ever, which is great. But we had a lot to say about the Scream franchise. It's one of our favorites. Continues to be one of our favorites. I think it'll long be one of our favorites. Any last words about the series or anything?
I think I've said everything.
All right. Well, until next time, stay creepy.